Hi, thanks for checking in and giving me a chance to describe my infographic to you. A little background on why I chose this subject matter. I'm a Google certified innovator from the Sweden 17 cohort, and the problem that I have worked on over the last year is trying to enhance the media literacy of both students and educators. So when I applied to the cohort, the SHEG report was something that I used as my evidence for the fact that this problem was important to be tackled. And so I chose to use the executive summary of the SHEG report for the subject of my infographic. So SHEG is the Stanford History Education Group, and they did a study in 2016 about students' civic online reasoning when they first visited schools, and this is middle schools, high schools, and colleges or universities. They found that their instrument was not appropriate for what they were trying to find out because students were performing so poorly that the instrument wasn't providing them any useful information. They went back to the drawing board, created a new instrument, and in doing that, then returned to schools and administered it to, again, middle school, high school, and college age students. And their conclusion was that student skills were abysmal. And that it was an educational imperative that we begin to address this in our classrooms. And I think that that fits nicely with our unit on visual literacy, given that the Pew Center did research with teenagers around the United States just this year, 2018, and in May released their survey results, and students reported that YouTube, Snapchat, and Instagram were their top three choices of online platforms for consuming content and interacting and things like that. So they are the video and the image, photograph, visual text generation, certainly. And SHEG also alluded to the fact that they are overwhelmed by trying to unpack the blended media that they encounter on a daily basis. And so that is why I chose this subject matter. So to scroll in just a little bit to make it a little easier for you to see, I began with the title and a quotation from the SHEG report about digital natives. The next segment of the SHEG report is about social media. So I used icons for social media that would be familiar to both the students and the teachers who might be interacting with my infographic. I paired that with a paraphrased statement from the executive summary about our assumption that students are social media savvy, and yet their research finding that frequently students are easily duped by things that they see on social media. I changed background colors, and this blue section is a quote from the report itself, that we once relied on publishers, editors, and subject matter experts to vet the information we consume. But on the unregulated internet, all bets are off. And I tried to reinforce that statement with the graphics that are associated with it, the check mark and the clipboard. The next segment is the gray section here with the quotation from Dr. Michael Lynch, and I chose to use that because I'm in Connecticut and working primarily with teachers in Connecticut, unless I'm presenting at a national conference somewhere. And Michael Lynch is a professor at UConn, so I thought that would be important to show that somebody from our state, a professor from our state, was being referenced in this kind of important research. And again, I used the unlocking of the lock with the tables and data and download buttons and things like that as a reference to the comments that Dr. Lynch was making. I moved into the next segment to show that one of the most important things that the SHEG study talked about in the executive summary was the issue of native advertising and the fact that ads now masquerade as news, and students have trouble distinguishing what are actual news stories versus what are native advertising that is laid out and presented to look like news, but is in fact sponsored content. And then The big question that they have to ask, of course, is where did this document that I'm looking at come from? If media is content created for a purpose, then it's incumbent upon all of us to question what is the purpose of the media we are receiving. So I wanted to highlight that question in a way that students would understand it as being connected to even the work that they're doing at school. Finally, I used the scales to represent strengths and weaknesses of different sources of information to also first be able to acknowledge or determine the veracity of information, and then also to weigh its appropriateness for the task that the student may be engaged in at the time. And finally, the last statement is why all of this matters to all of us, and that is that our civic online reasoning is essential to a healthy democracy and civil online discourse. So thank you very much. And I just want to go back to the top really quickly and point out this graphic. When having a meeting with my peer reviewer from the course, she liked the colors that I used, but the original color for this particular icon, she suggested that I adjust it. And so I chose to pick up the blue from the middle and the blue from the bottom and echo that at the top. And I think that was good feedback from her. We also talked about whether or not my icons were appropriately reflecting the written content on the page, and she agreed that the icons did do that and that there was a good balance of text and images. So thank you very much.